Alright, so when I know the answer, you just say what the answer is. So like, square root of 25, it's 5. I know that that's 5 because I know that 5 times 5 is 25. Negative square root of 81, well, I know square root of 81 is 9, so then I just put a negative in front of it. Number 3 says plus or minus square root of 100. That plus or minus is weird, but that is a way that you might see things written. So the plus or minus, just say there, what's the square root of 100? 10. Alright, now we're to the point that we don't know what the square root is. We don't know what the square root of 32 is. There's not something that I can multiply twice to give me 32. It's just a decimal on the calculator. Okay? So what we have to do is we have to break it down into something simpler. Now, there's lots of ways that you can do this, but most of the Math 2 and Math 3 teachers break it down using its factors. Okay? So out to the side, we start with 32, and we're going to break 32 down, like we're going to divide 32 by something that goes into it. When you decide what to go into it, you need to pick prime numbers. Okay? Tell me some prime numbers. 2 is a prime number. 3 is a prime number. 5 is a prime number. 7 is a prime number. 11, 13. Prime numbers are numbers that you can only multiply one in itself, that there's nothing else that you can multiply to get it. So like 9 is not prime because 3 times 3 is 9. And 8 is not prime because 2 times 4 is 8. 6 is not prime because 2 times 3 is 6. Does that make sense? So whenever I figure out what to divide by, I start with a prime number. And it can be any prime number that goes into it. The only one that goes into it is 2. Okay, so I'm going to divide 32 by 2. And I get 16. Is 16 a prime number? No. So I'm going to divide it again. What's something else that's prime that goes into 16? 2 again, right? I get 8 when I divide that. Is 8 prime? No, keep going. I want to divide it by 2. And I get 4. It's not prime. I'm going to keep going. Divide 4 by 2. And I get 2. Now it's prime, I stop. Okay? Now here's the part that's kind of tricky. After you divide everything, okay, then what you do is you circle the pairs. You circle any combination of 2 that's there. So like there's 2 2s right there. And there's two more 2s. Okay? And then I'm going to underline what's left over. Okay? All the stuff in the box, like the 32 and the 16, 8, those are not left over because I broke them down. I don't do anything with those. But I do have a 2 left over that I didn't do anything with. Okay, whatever's circled goes on the outside of the square root, and whatever's not circled goes on the inside. And if you have more than one of each thing, you just take one of the pairs and multiply, and you take whatever's left over and multiply. Okay, so you're going to take 2 times 2 because you're going to take one of each pair. That goes on the outside. 2 times 2 is 4. There's a 2 left over, so 2 goes on the inside. If you put square root of 32 in the calculator and you put 4 square root of 2 in the calculator, you're going to get the same answer. Okay, that would be a way for you to check to see. It's going to give you the same decimal, so you'll know if you did it right. That's the same process every time. You start with prime numbers, you divide them, see what you get. You circle pairs, take one of each pair, it goes on the outside. Whatever's left over goes on the inside. Okay, let's look at the next one, 72. All right. Tell me something to divide 72 by. A prime number. How about 2 again? Okay, 72 divided by 2 is 36. Okay, what's something I'm going to divide 36 by? 2. I get 18. What can I divide 18 by? 2. Then I get 9. Yay, it's not going to be 2s this time. What do I divide 9 by? 3. And I get a 3. Okay, that's what I have. Okay, circle every 2 of them. So I'm going to circle 2 2s, and I'm going to circle 2 3s. And I'm going to underline this 2 that's left over. Okay, take one of everything that's circled, it goes on the outside, so it goes on the outside. 2 times 3. See, there's a circle of 2's and there's a circle of 3, so take one of each one and multiply. So 2 times 3, which is 6, goes on the outside. What's left over? 2, so it goes on the inside. Questions? Okay, we're going to do one more and then I'll let you try some again. So let's start with 108. 108 seems really big. It's okay, we can do this. Let's just start with 2, because I know 2 will go into it. It's 54 times. 2 goes into that. 27 this time. Okay, what can I divide 27 by? 3. Alright. I have 9, so I'm going to divide 9 by 3, and then I'm going to get a 3. Am I done? Okay. So I'm going to circle my 3 and my 2, and I have a 3 left over. So what goes on the outside? 6. 2 times 3. And what goes on the inside? 3. So number 7, whenever you break it down, a lot of you went by 2's. And so you end up with that. 3 2's and a 5. Okay? If I circle the pair of 2's, I know that a 2 is going to go on the outside. Okay, what's left over? 2 and 5. So multiply 2 and 5 together and get 10.
So you don't multiply both of these?
No, you don't multiply the pairs. You always just take one of each pair out. The only reason on the first 2 that we multiply by the pairs was because there were 2 pairs. So that's why we did 2 times 3. Or 2 times 3 on 5. Alright, let's look at 8. So if we divide 24 by 2, we get 12. Divide it by 2, we get 6. Divide it by 2, we get 3. It's a very similar problem. We have a pair of 2's and then a 2 and a 3 left over. So the pair of 2's goes on the outside, so that's a 2. And then the 2 times 3 left over, that goes on the inside, so you get 6. Any questions? Because you know that on 9 that the square root of 25 is 5 or the square root of 100 is 10, you can just write those and not have to do the whole process. Okay, so when I do number 10, I break down to 12, I divide by 2, divide by 2 again. I have a pair of 2's and a 3. See, it can't come outside the square root unless there's a pair and you only get one of them. Yeah, it's 2 and then square root 3.
Okay, we have another.
Okay, so 11, we have, maybe if we divide that by 2 will work. 2 divided, it's 48 if you do 2. You can divide it by 3 as well. Okay, if I divide that by 2, I get 24. I don't know, I just like go ahead and get the 2's out of the way. But you can do the 3's, it doesn't matter. Alright, and then we have a 3. So, we have 2 pairs of 2's, a 2, and a 3. So one of the first 2's comes out, and one of the second 2's comes out. So that makes 4. And then 2 times 3 comes together. That goes on the inside. So the other thing that you need to know about square roots is sometimes you might have a negative underneath them. And you may have probably talked about square roots with a negative before, and when you did, you just said, well, you can't do that because there's not 2 things that will multiply to give you a negative. Okay? Well, I'm telling you that when you have a negative underneath the square root, that you end up with something called an I. Okay? It's called an imaginary number, and it's always an I, the letter I. Whenever you solve equations and that kind of thing, I is never used because I is considered to be an imaginary number. And you're probably thinking, what do I care about imaginary numbers? Well, there's lots that you can do with them, and so we're going to show you a couple things with them. Okay? Basically, what you need to know is that when you see a negative underneath the square root, that's when you have to use I. Okay? So, these imaginary numbers are called complex numbers, and there's lots of different ways that you can write complex numbers, but sometimes it's written like this, where A and B are numbers, like it might say 2 plus 3i, or negative 4 plus 5i. A and B are just numbers. And then the important thing is this very last statement right here, that square root of negative 1 is I. Okay, so number 13. Forget about the negative a second. What's the square root of 25? 5. And then what would be left over is that square root of a negative 1. Okay, so what we do, because there's a negative underneath the square root, is we just put an I with a 5, and then that's the answer. Only when it's underneath the square root do you do that. So number 14. Square root of 100 is 10, and then I put 10i. If you put square root of negative 100 in your calculator, it's going to tell you non-real answer, because it's not a real solution. It's imaginary, and so we put an I. Okay? All right, number 15. We already broke down 24, I think, up at the top. Number 8, I believe it was. It was 2 square root 6. You do that the same way, but you put an I with it. And it goes outside the square root right beside the number. All right, we'll do number 16 together. You do it the same way as you did before, just don't worry about the negative at first. Divide the 18 by 2, you get 9. What in the world? There we go. And then divide it by 3, and you get a 3. So we have a pair of 3's and a 2. So it's 3 square root of 2. So you do that like normal, but then you go back and say, there's that negative there. So I put the I with the 3 in front of it.